we rely on thoughts too much. But if you think, and especially at pickleball, you just talked about, in any sport, you just talked about how fast it can go. When you do something that's quick, there is no thought to it at all. You do not have time to think. All we need is the awareness and presence. That's it. And the body knows what to do. So once we've established physical athleticism within ourselves, we can let ourselves not think, but turning the thinking process off. There's just little tools and practices that people can do to do that. And then that's when you get into what, they'll say the zone. The mind gets quiet and you're completely connected.
Hello, you sexy humans. You are about to listen to an episode that dives into, among other things, the power of meditation, being present. Presence is the one thing that defines the quality of your life. There are people who have it all, the riches, the Porsches, the mansions, and they just can't feel fulfilled because they're not enjoying the moment. And there are people who seemingly have nothing, yet lead a life of incredible fulfillment because they tap into the moment and make that a constant in their journey. There's a quote from Kung Fu Panda that goes, "Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift," which is why we call it the present. So be present and give yourself the present of AUXORO Premium. If bonus content is calling out to you, head to auxoro.supercast.com for bonus episodes, subscriber-only AMAs where you can ask me anything, exclusive writings not released to the public, and the entire back catalog of bonus content that grows every month. There are over 40 hours of bonus content at auxoro.supercast.com. AUXORO Premium not only directly supports the continuation of the AUXORO Podcast, but it's also a gift to yourself. And if you can't support the podcast financially, that is perfectly okay. I just ask that you take 1 minute to leave us a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to help push the show through the roof. When you leave us a good rating, you are nudging the algorithm to show the podcast to more people, and then more people discover the show. The amount that your ratings help the show cannot be overstated. Thank you for however you choose to support. And now, without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Melissa McKay. So I had the pleasure of going through your Instagram page. I think this was yesterday afternoon, and you had a recent post on manifesting, and I had always been skeptical of manifesting because I feel like there's a sphere of the get rich quick YouTube space, like kind of like the Grant Cardone manosphere that kind of ruined it for me, where it's like, give me $1,000 for this course and manifest your $20 million real estate portfolio. It only takes 6 weeks. And this space is constantly being barraged to people on YouTube, or maybe it's just my search history. Maybe I'm Googling get rich quick, and that's why I'm getting all of these videos recommended to me. That could be part of it. But then there's also my athletic background that is super interested in manifesting, because when I was playing college baseball, I used to do a lot of visualization, and I don't know if that qualifies as manifesting, but I would sit around before games and I would just try to picture what was going to happen before it actually happened and go through it in my mind. So I wanted to ask you, what is manifestation the way that you use it? Like, how do you experience manifestation?
Yeah, and the way you described it is used very frequently in professional athletics. It's a mind practice, and the primary purpose of my mind practices or mental training or habituation of the mind is for spiritual practice. But I was a very young adult when I started the spiritual practice, and I really went into it with an intention of not letting worldly things get in the way of my spiritual practice. So without ordaining, as a lay person, I wouldn't take a job or anything like that if I prioritized being able to go on long, intensive meditation retreats. And, that didn't do very much for my financial situation. So
that's where the get rich quick comes in.
Yeah, well, I don't think of it as quick because it's really not. It's you really have to train your mind, and when you train your mind, then your actions follow that. But it is also true that. Well, let me finish what I was saying. So, my first husband was kind of not into it, but he would just see it all the time. He was a professional musician, and when he was young, he would visualize himself playing in stadiums, and those kinds of things would happen for him. And he would write songs and those kinds of things. So we were exploring that together, and then it became a good tool for me to just direct my personal life. And so huge wealth is not an aspiration of mine, but so I don't use it in that way. But I really enjoy the play of it. The most important practice is mindfulness practice, because in mindfulness practice, we get to know the laws of the universe, what are our afflictive emotions, what is occurring in our minds leads to pain and suffering for us, and what leads to freedom and lightness. And that's the highest kind of happiness. And actually, even the woman that wrote this, The Secret now, Rhonda Byrne, her follow-up book to that is something like The Greatest Secret, and she talks about that the highest form of happiness isn't one that is dependent on conditions. So, and that's just not highest because she says it, or because the Buddha said it, or because I said it, or anything. It's just like what we can taste in our experience. It feels the most delightful, So when we manifest something in the world, it's subject to change, right? So it's always temporary, and it's subject to conditions. You can manifest a house, and like in her case, she manifested a mansion, and then it nearly caught fire in the Santa Barbara fires. And, so that is what the Buddha pointed to as the insecurity that exists in things in the world. But nevertheless, if we're living lay life, as you and I are, then we are directing our attention all the time. And we are manifesting, we are creating things all the time. So to be more conscientious about that, to go deeper into our hearts and say, well, how do I really want to live my life? And to move from that place. And then the manifesting, as it's taught by all of the manifestation teachers, and a whole bunch of very successful people know this as a trick, is to see yourself in the conditions as if it's already the case. Now that does a whole lot, because we can identify as not being good enough in all kinds of ways. We can identify with not being worthy. We can identify with limitations in the mind of not able to. And once we're identifying in that way, what do? We look in the world for the continuation of that belief. That's what all beliefs do. So addressing our limiting beliefs it's great fun to play with. And when I teach the class, I really like it because I incorporate what I call intentional thoughts. Yeah. Other people call them affirmations. I don't like that word, affirmations, but our minds are thinking all the time, right? Thinking, and thoughts are consequential. And thoughts very often for people go negative. So to shift your thinking to encouraging thoughts towards yourself, towards loving thoughts towards yourself, towards confident thoughts like I can do this, and to see through those limitations that we create is what's going to make us feel like in the world of formation that we're living our best life.
Yeah, I like the aspect of playing around with it too, because when I was still playing baseball, I have vivid memories of sitting in the training room before I would even start warming up, or before I started going onto the field, and I would just think pitch by pitch what was going to happen and what the results were going to be. And if I found myself becoming too wrapped up in the results, or like that everything had to be 100% success rate, and I tried to make my visualizations that, I felt like it would actually make me more anxious and put more stress on me. So I actually started visualizing mixing in bad situations, like if I gave up a grand slam or something in the first inning, which is like a stake in the heart for a starting pitcher. Like everyone wants to have a quick 1, 2, 3 first inning just to set the tone. You don't want to throw 50 pitches in the first inning and be down 5 runs in 15 minutes, and you're just like, what the fuck is going on? But I would visualize aspects of that just to. I don't know if I was even doing this consciously, but I felt like it was regulating my emotions in the face of failure. So I would visualize success, and then I would visualize giving up a grand slam, and I would just kind of like sit in it and feel it. And I don't have a measurement in terms of, like I wasn't strapped in with my brain being analyzed or anything like that. But I do feel like when those things actually happened in the game, they were less destructive because of the way that I was visualizing them before. So, and I feel like playing around with it and not being too strict and being willing to experience failure in my own head before I actually experienced it in the game, which is inevitable, made it much more tolerable, and also stopped the spiral sooner. Like I definitely feel like there's situations where things would have spiraled way more out of control, athletically and probably off the field as well, if I wasn't visualizing those spiral scenarios before they actually occurred.
Yeah, I saw an interview with RFK recently where he was talking about Kelly Slater, who said, they were talking about manifestation and how you're supposed to visualize the end. And he said that Kelly Slater told him that he would visualize himself completely losing, and then that made him give up and then just feel free. Like it didn't matter anymore. There was no pressure. And so that's how RFK is running his campaign for presidency, I guess. And I get how that can work. And it's going towards the same kind of thing where you're not clinging to the outcome of what you're doing. So that's one way. But with visualization practice, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And you can't do it just once. It takes it's a lot of mental training and practice. You have to keep bringing yourself back to that place. But if you can get yourself to the place of absolutely believing it and then sustain that, and anybody could, if they worked on it every day, then that would do the exact same thing where you're...
Sorry about that. Quick interruption from the podcast gods. You were talking about Kelly Slater, and he was using visualization as a technique and even being willing to visualize failure.
Yeah, no, he accepted it. That was his method, is accepting that he wasn't going to win. So rather than visualizing that he was going to win, he'd accept that he wasn't, and that would free him up to be relaxed and just be natural. And that's what both the visualization and I guess that as a technique can help you do. But if we are doing a visualization, then doing it to the degree that we really believe it would create that kind of relaxation also. There's the letting it go piece, that's the hardest for a lot of people, and accepting it. You can't do it kind of like this. I mean, it has to be like really, you're really committed to it, and the mind will go back to its old conditioning again and again. And so it's not a simple thing. It's not a magical thing, but one can recondition their minds to do anything. And there's a powerful point in our mind when we're saying that comes at the point of identifying. How do we fill in the sentence, I am?
Yeah. And pushing it away like this is how I spent the majority of my baseball career. Up until the last 2 years, I wouldn't even entertain the possibility of failure, and I felt like, I don't know. There's this superstition in college baseball, at least professional baseball. I'm sure it's in other sports, but like especially the pitcher's super isolated during the game. They're on the mound by themselves. They're the only one that's doing something every single play. and before the game even starts, there's like this, you know, like the team just lets the pitcher do their own thing. Like, don't talk to him, don't say anything, like don't mess it up. It's like a very for a like a masculine sport, it's a very delicate superstition of like anything could, you know, mess his day up. Just like even joking or something before the game. And I wish I was much more accepting of failure while I was playing and the possibility of failure. And then also being playful. Like I always think that's my number one regret, is not making the number one purpose of my sports career being like playing around, like in everything that I do, whether it's practice or playing, like to always have a playful spirit. It doesn't have to be, even when I'm competing, it doesn't have to be this very hard, you know, like straight edge, grunting, just like forcing it through the finish line. Like shit happens, and if you play around with it, it becomes much more enjoyable and much more manageable. And I suspect that if I did visualization before you know, like 2016, that I would have had not necessarily like a in terms of numbers wise and performance wise a better career, but I think I would have enjoyed my career more, even if it turned out the same.
Well, you know, it's interesting how much the mind game is part of athletics, and because one can have the completely physical abilities that match anybody else, but that mind game is really important. And if we identify with our mistakes, then that's the I. But if you think of yourself as a successful, of course, Muhammad Ali was known to have done this. That was, I'm the greatest. That's what he would do. And he did it to the degree he's owning it. He's not doing it and just kind of doing it. He's owning that. Like he's all in with it. He's believing with his cells, and he would be in fights with people that should have easily beat him, stronger, bigger than him or whatever. And he could overcome them because of that mind. It's so powerful, the way the mind. So if you make a mistake, but you're identifying with yourself as a successful person, then you just think that mistake's not me.
Yeah.
And you walk over it,
exactly.
You know? But if we identify with our mistakes, then we can trip and stumble and think, what's wrong with me? We can start going down to these spirals of anxiety or emotions that disrupt the mind from being present and relaxed, which is important apparently even in boxing. That's what Mike Tyson said.
Yeah.
In boxing, you have to be relaxed. Can you imagine? And I play.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I play pickleball, and so I love playing with the mind, or I bring the mental practices. I'm not. I don't have any high aspirations for championships for pickleball or anything. I do it because I enjoy it, but I still like to play with it. The way that you use mindfulness, even concentration, relaxation, or the way you talk to yourself, the inner voices, the way you're talking, or the sense of confidence. It's funny, somebody can come on the court and you just think they're going to beat me. Sometimes if it's men or younger men, I just will start with that identity and set myself up for not, you know, so of course they're going to win. I believe that, and that's what ends up happening, yeah. You know. So fun to see how powerful the mind is. I played
tennis for a while when I was younger, and I just played pickleball for the first time a couple weekends ago. And I was going into the game all cocky, like I face guys that serve 120 miles an hour. I can return that. Tennis is pretty fast. Pickleball can't be that. Yeah. You know, if anything, I'm just gonna be a complete natural at it. And I could not have been more wrong, more of a douchebag going into the game, because immediately I'm trying to load up and I hit the ball over the fence twice. I'm like, I can't use you have to be much more careful with the angles and the placement because the court is so much smaller. It's so fast. Yeah. There was one moment where it was like present but terrifying at the same time because all four people were up in the box and we were just smashing it. And I was like legitimately scared of, what if I take this off the face? Like this is you know, it was right before a wedding too. So I was like, I'm just going to have a giant welt on my forehead standing there in front of 200 people. But it was, a very it was a good learning experience in terms of not being cocky going into a game that seems like pickleball even sounds like a kid's game. I was like, pickleball, like this is gonna be fine. And 2 hours later, I'm just like sweating and bloody and fucking like torn down. And it was a good time.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Young athletic boys usually come on and they think they're going. It's hilarious. It's hilarious, but it's an easy sport to get good at quickly, but it's difficult to master.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm curious. Do you ever get any athletes that reach out to you for meditation or mindfulness, or have you ever worked with any athletes that are trying to master that?
No, but I think I'll probably start. I'm going to start putting some videos on. Just on the courts with friends. I've done it. I had this girl come on or tell me one time, she's such a good player. She was a 4-5 player, and she told me she stopped competing. And she stopped competing because she didn't like how her mind went during competitions. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want you to not compete for that. So I gave her a little trick to get out of the stories in her mind, which was to just concentrate and to say in her head ball, and to make everything about the ball and focus nothing but on the ball. Forget the people, forget everything, keep your eye on the ball, and then say ball, because when you are saying something in your mind can't at the same time be going, self-doubt or worry, or I don't want to disappoint my partner, or all the barrage of negativity that the mind will do. As soon as you just have a word in your mind, it blocks everything else out. The nervous system gets calm, and then you're present.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I ran into her at a tournament, and she had leveled up and won the gold of a 5-0 match after that. And she told me, that was key for her getting back in and doing it. And it was something that really worked. And I've shared it with a few other people, and that's one mental method that is really helpful for sports playing. So, yeah, I will put some tools up on my YouTube page and see where that leads.
Yeah, I would imagine that would carry over to multiple sports, because there's a thing that happens when you do thousands of repetitions of something that you just the familiar starts to feel weird, and then you start to psych yourself out. And especially pitching, I'm visualizing all of those times where I stopped thinking of pitching as just one fluid mechanism, and I'm in my head during the game trying to like break down all 30 parts of delivering a pitch, and it was like driving me crazy. And you just you get in this cyclical mind fuck cycle. And there was one point where I just broke it up into 2 parts with a phrase, and I wouldn't say it out loud, but I would say it in my own head. And there's this part in the pitching motion where you're loading, so you're not going forward yet, and I would go stop, 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 and then in my head when I went forward I would say go. So I'd just be like stop, 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 go, and like try to get like a rhythm out of it, almost like kind of like a pendulum thing. And that whenever I started to overthink and like almost become too self-aware of my body, saying something in my head was a good way to break myself out of it.
Yeah, perfect. That's exactly what you need, because we rely on thoughts too much. But if you think, and especially pickleball, you just talked about, in any sport, you just talked about how fast it can go. When you do something that's quick, there is no thought to it at all. You do not have time to think. All we need is the awareness and presence. That's it. And the body knows what to do. So once we've established physical athleticism within ourselves, we can let ourselves not think, but turning the thinking process off. There's just little tools and practices that people can do that. And then that's when you get into what, they'll say the zone. The mind gets quiet and you're completely connected. I had a day like that yesterday because I had done a lot of meditation. I was so present. I had no thoughts in my mind when I was playing. And of course, I played well. And that's what mindfulness is, that present moment attention. Anytime we're like that, it shows that there are these world benefits of our meditation practice.
Do you have a dream athlete to work with, or did you ever see someone on TV where you're like, if only I spent 10 minutes with this person, I could just completely turn around their game? Like someone that's just, just eating shit on the PGA Tour, or just any athlete that you'd have in mind.
I grew up in a family that watched a lot of sports or whatever, but I personally did not once I was an adult. But I have been watching more pickleball lately. And sometimes when I watch those young professionals, then I can see exactly when it's just a mind technique. So there are a few of them that I would say, oh, if they would just, if they would incorporate this, because it's just mind, they have it in the body completely. And there's different things, there's the 5 powers, mental strengths, and Buddhist practice are called spiritual faculties that we hone and grow in our meditation practice so that they become a habit of mind, and they are what will lead to enlightenment, and that purpose, which means freeing the mind of all afflictive emotions, right? But as we strengthen these 5 powers of mind, they help everything in the world that we do too. So they are mindfulness, and that's present moment attention. If you're pitching, it's just that one moment of pitching at a time, super focused, right? And then there's concentration. That's keeping the eye on the ball, keeping the eye on one thing. And then there's faith, confidence. And that is something that we have to condition ourselves to believe in. That's what a lot of manifestation is. And then energy, and then wisdom in Buddhist practice, but within sports, that is smart play. And that comes with time, just like with practice. Wisdom has grown over time. Smart play comes from time on the court, or time on the field, or time on the mound.
Yeah. I think about that a lot now when I'm watching baseball, and I know that every single guy at the major league level has the skills to be able to throw a strike. And I'm focusing more in on the pitchers when I'm talking about it, but they have the skills. They know how to do it. If no one was watching, they'd be able to do it. In other situations, it's just an unconscious thing. You just go through your motion and throw a strike. And then there are certain times where I'm watching a game and all of a sudden the pitcher can't find the strike zone, and the other team starts getting louder. He walks the first guy, walks the second guy. You could see like his mind starts to turn towards, instead of like, I'm going to have success, is that I have to not let this unravel. Like you start thinking about just like, holy shit, I'm gonna walk this guy in, like no one's even gonna get a hit this inning. I'm just gonna walk everyone around the bases and not be able to find the strike zone. And you can I feel for the pitchers in that moment, because they have all the skills in the world, but because of something mental, there's this blockage where they can't access it in that moment, or it's distorting the delivery from the unconscious muscle memory to the physical mechanism. And there should be a whole, hours a week dedicated to mentally unblocking whatever that is, because it at a certain point, it's not about acquiring more skills. It's just about honing the mentality to deliver those skills.
Yeah, that's it. It's the mind. And so when I see some of the players, I can tell what it is. Like, oh, they need a little bit more confidence, or they need more concentration. Like if a player is, there's one particular player, I won't name a name, but does a lot of kind of macho, pounding his chest after getting a point and engaging with the audience and all of that. And it's what we have to understand is all of that has just taken your energy and your focus. And there's a reverberation of having done that the next, you're not going to be able to concentrate. You cannot concentrate and do that at the same time, And so removing the things in one's mind or habits that take away from concentration. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it is a mind game. My husband is a world champion gymnast from the
Oh,
Soviet
wow.
Union.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so back in the 80s, when the Soviet Union were like gold, bronze, and silver all the time, they took their athletes from, he was 7 years old, and they took him to a camp, and he trained for 8 hours a day. So, but he went through a period of what you're talking about, where he just started shaking in competition. And that's what the Soviets did. They taught him meditation, to gave him some technique and taught him meditation, and he was able to overcome it. We can overcome anything in the mind. But we need technique.
Yeah, I can't imagine that level of pressure, because if I fucked up in a baseball game, we have another game the next day. But to be on the Olympic stage, and you're getting a shot once every 4 years at best, that to me is insane. I couldn't imagine, like doing a gym routine or running 100 meters and knowing like this is what I worked 4 years for leading up to this, a minute.
Yeah.
Like, like 4 years for 1 minute, or however long it is, however many competitions there are, it's still like a very small amount of time compared to the training. I don't even know how I could release myself of the vibrations of anxiety, just thinking about, what could this all be for nothing? Or what if I like trip? Like, what if before I even take my first step, I just eat shit and trip, and it becomes one of those viral moments on TV. It's like sprinter trips out of the box or like pulls their hamstring on the first stride, or.
So you have to learn how to not entertain those thoughts, when they come up. It's like, nope, and keep the mind focused. And then we can live above those thoughts, so they're not pulling us down. Why are we even thinking about those things? But it's a good metaphor for our spiritual practice, because we all have within us an inner something that's trying to hurt us, the sabotager, That's what is this? What is this thing? And it does it in athletics, and it does it in other parts of our life, these inner thoughts that we have to learn how to not engage in and to overcome, and we can overcome. And that's what all of meditation practice is making the other side of the mind stronger, so that we aren't overcome by our thoughts.
So once you identify that self-sabotage part of the mind, or that anxiety spiral, self-hatred, once you recognize that, like I knew it was there for a long time, even subconsciously. Like I knew there was part of me that wanted to see me fail and like got off on it. But I still struggle with this. Like, how do you live above that part of the mind and push it away without attracting it? Because a lot of times I feel like me pushing things away just makes it come back even stronger. Like, is it just like a gentle awareness of it? Are you blocking it out? Like, what does that mechanism look like when you start to live above those thoughts?
Yeah, there's different skillful ways to handle those kinds of thoughts. And that's what the various meditation techniques and practices, we're training in doing that. Anytime we practice mindfulness, anytime we practice concentration technique. So when we practice mindfulness, what we're doing is looking directly at those thoughts. And that helps us to see them for what they are, which are just these little phantoms in the brain trying to hurt us. And it's only when we believe those thoughts that they have any power over us. And with mindfulness, we see, do I want to go down that? Do I want, and what is this thing anyways? And over time that will weaken that, because you just see it. Buddha would say, Mara, I see you. He called the personification of all of the negativity of the mind Mara, which is good. It's good not to identify it as yourself, right? Just, this is a visitor. It's not helping me. It's not uplifting my life. And eventually, when mindfulness gets stronger, then those things weaken in us. Or they can come if they want. You're not going to pick it up. It comes without any blip at all when we strengthen. Or there's times that we just ignore it. if we're talking about on a athletic level, it's best to just ignore it and put your mind on what you're doing exactly. If your mind is on what you're doing, then you can't be thinking at the same time. But having those little like words like ball, having a little thing that keeps you in the present moment, ball, I can't doubt myself. I can't worry that I'm going to embarrass or humiliate myself. I can't do anything if my mind is saying ball, and then you just stay focused, and that relaxes, like I said, it relaxes the nervous system.
Yeah. So seeing it, but not identifying it as yourself, whatever that is, if you want to give it a name, Maura or Jeff, like whatever that part of yourself is,
yes.
Or in situations where you're actively performing, to just ignore it, to get lost in the performance, to the point where you couldn't even entertain it if you wanted to.
Well, having a meditation practice is key, because if you try to do this just in the middle of what you're doing, like that technique I gave my friend, it worked for her. But if you really want to strengthen this, then you have to do it in an isolated period where you're really developing that technique of just being mindful, or just concentrating on one object for a concentration technique.
Yeah. What is your practice look like on a day-to-day? Because I started meditating about 4 years ago, and I've used the Insight timer. Right now I use the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. I do that for 20 minutes each morning, sometimes twice a day. And I just feel like now, 4 years in, I'm getting strong glimpses of dropping into true presence, whether I'm doing nothing or whether I'm having a conversation, whether I'm washing dishes, working out. I feel like I feel like I've gotten to, I don't want to say another level, because that makes it sound like I'm trying to beat the final boss of meditation or something, like, in a video game. I'm trying to like get to the fire breathing dragon at the end of the meditation course. Yeah.
Well, you kind of are. You kind of. It's not a bad analogy.
So yeah, maybe it is another level. But so I'm curious what your. I know you have thousands of hours of training and intense retreat practice. And I definitely want to get into that. And I'm also curious, just on a day-to-day, what your practice looks like from a practical standpoint, like sitting, lying down. Do you go outside, eyes closed, things like that? Like what does your body and mind look like?
Yeah, in a formal meditation posture, I practice every day. Often when I first wake up, and then often midday, and then at the end of the day. But I say this all the time, and I don't know if it's encouraging or discouraging, but the longer that I've practiced, the more I practice. And what that means is that I just am always trying to watch my mind throughout the day, because I know it is a creator, and I know that minds go negative constantly. So watching it helps to guard against the negativity of the mind, and living more in the present moment, or with conscientiousness and the people that are in your life with you. I try to do it as much as possible. And my ideal is to know my mind in each and every moment. And I love it. I've always just loved the exploration of consciousness. It's ever fascinating to me. It is the creating source of the universe. It's what everything stems from, is this consciousness. So, and there are levels of seeing and understanding, levels of clarity, purity, pleasure that are beyond what we experience in our normal existence. So the mind is vast and powerful, and so for me, it's an all-day thing.
Yeah, I guess when I said the next level, if I was to put that into a concrete sort of what that looks like for me, I would say that I'm starting to incorporate it into the rest of my day. Because when I first started, I felt like it was a mess, and I would have good meditations occasionally, or what I experience as good, and I would pat myself on the back and I go like, oh my God, I felt like pretty focused for 10 minutes or 20 minutes. But then the rest of the day, I would just be like sleepwalking through everything and not being mindful outside of the meditation. So I feel like now I'm starting to be much more mindful, especially during transitional moments. Like I won't, or I try not to finish a podcast and then just like, shut my mind off and just finish the work that I have to do for the day. Like I'll be like, okay, I'm getting up from the desk now. I'm transitioning. I feel the floor on my feet. I am consciously moving to this next task. And I never really had that, before, or at least not consistently.
Yeah. And, I had a thought and now I lost it. I'm sorry.
Maybe it was a negative one that you pushed away. You blocked it out.
No, it was not. No. But the formal meditation period each day is important, where you remove distractions and quiet your mind. Find a time of day that works for you. I always tell people to sit for 45 minutes. That's how I started. Having that in your day you'll really see effects of your practice, where you're not as reactive, where you're able to change the conditioned habits of the mind, and incorporating that throughout the day. Of course, if that feels impossible, which it does for some people, any amount of time that feels feasible is good and helpful.
So probably the most difficult part for me is the very beginning of a meditation, dropping into it. And there's a cue on the app that I use, which is, like drop everything and see if you can arrive instantly. And I feel like I always fuck it up. Like I'm like trying too hard to drop in instantly and forget about the whole day in front of me. And the more I try, the more I'm delaying the, kind of like the acceptance of the present moment in the meditation. And I can't, it's hard for me to surrender at the beginning. And so I wanted to ask you, what is the right balance of effort and surrender during meditation? Because like you can't, like you're not unconscious, you're not sleeping. That would be zero effort. Like you have an awareness, and you're attempting to focus your concentration to varying degrees. So there is effort, but then you're also trying to surrender, which can seem contrary to effort. So like, is there a right balance to that? Is there a zone or anything that you're conscious of when you're dropping into those moments?
Yes, but you can't name it, and that's always an internal experience that you have to see. And we're always a little bit on one side or the other. This is the middle path, and those are two energies that we're trying to balance when we're meditating, and we're never perfect with it. And we might have tendencies. I have a tendency more towards energy and effort, and less towards surrender. So what that will manifest if I'm going too strong that way, as restlessness in my meditation practice, or worry, or kind of over hitting the mark there. And so we have to incline the mind a little bit back to, calm, tranquility, relaxation, trust. And then if you fall too much into that, then you can fall asleep, right? So we're always in balance between those two energies. But just to know that there's a balance in the energy is really enough. And that there is such thing as too much effort. That's something that people don't really understand. And in the West, people are really good at applying effort. And so bringing the tranquility factor, calm, relaxed factor. But same in our sports. It goes back to that same thing. It's wakefulness and relaxation that makes us successful in our meditation practice and in what we're doing in our life. I remembered I was going to say before to what you were saying about that good meditation, or you had a good meditation. At some point you stop qualifying. Anything that arises on your mat could not be otherwise on your cushion, right? It does so because of conditioning. So if you just had an argument with a coworker or something like that, when you sit down and meditate, there's going to be reverberations of that in your consciousness. And if you're aware of those reverberations, the awareness itself is success. It doesn't matter what you're aware of. And sometimes you're aware of like clarity, lucidity. And those are great moments, because you're tapping into the potential of the mind. And so that's great. But the mind will go back and forth between that vast consciousness, higher states of consciousness, and then come down into the trenches and the mud, grief and despair and self-hatred and worry and doubt. And we are meant to go through and feel all of those things. That is what helps the heart to let go of clinging to certain experiences. Just welcoming everything, the peaks and the valleys.
I like that the swaying pendulum or lever analogy where you're going to one side and going back to the other. It sounds like I don't know if you ever played Tony Hawk Pro Skater, but when you're grinding a rail, if you get more towards one side or the other, there's this thing on the screen and it's like a pizza pie and it goes in the red, yellow, and then green. And if you like sway too much on one side, it like starts to light up and get red and you fall off the rail. But then if you're like in the yellow and you like bring it back to the green, then you stay straight. So it made me think of that, just like the balancing act of just trying to, slide across a 50-foot rail while not trying to eat shit and break every bone in your body.
Yeah.
Even though I've never actually done it. I've just moved a character on GameCube to do it. I've done it virtually. I've broken many virtual bones. Yeah.
It's probably smart.
Yeah. But yeah, also the Kelly Slater, I'm sure if you spoke to him, he might have some similar visualizations when he's surfing, because the stakes are even higher than skateboarding or baseball. Like you literally could die in a lot of situations when you're going on those, like you're getting tugged up to those 100-foot waves and doing these surf competitions. Like you're literally the red is death in a lot of cases. So I bet he has some pretty gnarly analogies in his head, or maybe some cool mantras to keep those thoughts away, or to kind of like keep them balanced, not swaying towards one side or the other.
Yes, and here's the important thing to emphasize in all of this is that this is done, this kind of getting into the zone, this balanced mind, this present mind where things are flowing, is a possibility for everybody, but it doesn't happen accidentally. We condition and train the mind to do that. We can condition and habituate and train the mind. We don't sit back and ask and wait for these things to happen. You can't. You have to put in the work and the training to make these things happen. And as long as we do, then those states of consciousness are what are possible for us. I mean, and it's also just strange that we don't live in that kind of reality more often, that we're so unaware of ourselves and driven by subconscious impulses, and many of them are destructive. Small destructive, where you're just like keeping yourself awake at night with worrisome thoughts, or hugely destructive, where you're becoming suicidal or following an impulse of addiction or involving yourself in violence or whatever. But this is what the mind does. So, but it's all overcomable. We all have within us a natural awareness. And what we have to do is habituate and grow that, brighten up the consciousness so much, and that bright light of consciousness melts away all of the other destructive forces. That's what we're born into as human beings. We're on this quest against
Yeah.
evil.
Yeah.
We all are. And we either accept that quest or we just get driven around by it. And, many people are just nice enough people that they're not driven to. But even if you're a nice enough person or a successful enough person, people are still trapped by their minds. Everybody is. It's a universal thing. So it's something that can benefit anybody to overcome those negative tendencies.
Yeah, when there's a crime committed on TV, whether it's murder or domestic violence, some sort of public freak out, the friends of the people or the coworkers always go on TV and they say, I had no idea she was capable of this, or I had no idea he just seemed like such a nice person. And I always think in my head, like, I consider myself like a decent person, and I'm also capable of doing extremely violent things if something took hold of me and I wasn't aware of that. So I never really got that notion of, he is not capable, like he would never seem like the type of person to do that. I think anyone, when pushed into a corner, or when these the synchronization of negative circumstances come together, and you're not aware that it's boiling up within you, anyone could, flash out and kill someone if pushed to the right boundary, pushed to the limit, or hit someone, or, just scream in someone's face or say something disrespectful. And that is something that even my 20 minutes a day of meditation has made me aware of, is like just the random thoughts that pop into my head that are, of the negative variety that I used to just follow and not really be aware of them. And now I can kind of, watch them and be like, oh, that's, it's a thought. It doesn't mean that's what I'm going to do. That's just something that popped into my head. And for a long time, I never even, like, I didn't even want to associate that was a possibility. Like, of course I would never do that, but meditating has given me the awareness that I'm not immune to destruction, causing destruction to myself or causing destruction to other people. So yeah, it's always a funny thing when I see it. We're like, oh my God, I didn't know she could do that. It's like, of course anyone could do that in the right circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so wise of you to reflect in that way too, because so many people just like separate themselves, like, that's not me. I've always felt the same way too. It's causes and conditions that come together, and we all have the same exact ingredients in us of violence and anger and hatred and selfishness, or, all of these different things. Or a lot of times when you see these people, I've been weirdly watching a lot of those things in this kind of sociological kind of study. Like, what are the things that come together that would make somebody commit murder or whatever? And often it's intoxication. Very often it's intoxication. Yeah. That makes somebody, if somebody's not sociopathic or whatever, then very often there's intoxication. And then the other conditions of burning emotions. And you're right. You are exactly right. We all have those things. That's why the Buddha said to be so mindful, which means just to know your mind and what are your impulses. Like you're carrying a bowl of hot oil filled to the rim, to be that careful in our life.
Yeah.
Because that's how those, lives can completely change in a moment. I saw some YouTube video of this girl who completely disconnected from her reality because she was drinking and driving, killed 2 people, and she was being interrogated. Do you ever watch those interrogations on YouTube? Don't.
I have seen. I've watched some YouTube clips of cops, for sure. It's entertaining because I'm not the one being interrogated, but I can imagine that if I was in that situation, I'd just be like, I just destroyed my life. Like, what the hell is going on?
And this one girl, she completely cut off. You could tell what happened to her. She just couldn't accept that she had done something so horrible. So she was acting very flippantly and lightly in a very serious situation. And I could just see the pieces of what happened to her consciousness. She was a college going to, made a bad mistake of getting in the car and driving, and then ended up murdering 2 people.
Yeah.
But in an instant, that lives can change without.
Yeah, that's something I'll think about, not necessarily during a meditation, but when I think back to things that I did in college. And I graduated in 2015, so I was just getting into college in 2011, about a year before Uber and Lyft came on the map. And there were instances where I would drive buzzed back from downtown or campus, and I'd be like, it's like 5 minutes, nothing's going to happen. And then I thought that I was better at it because I wasn't getting into accidents, or I felt fine. But then someone else doing the same exact thing, just because of the luck of the draw or the unluck of the draw, ends up blowing through a red light or stop sign and killing someone like that girl. And so it's scary to realize that I've made the types of decisions that could land me in the same exact situation as that girl. But just because of how things, played out circumstantially, just pure luck, I wasn't one of those people.
Yeah, me too. In my younger years, now we're older and we won't make those kinds of mistakes, but they can happen in an instant, and that's particularly reckless. But being unaware can cause consequences that are even without a lot of recklessness.
Yeah, that I'm just trying to visualize that moment where her face just goes clear and she's talking to the cops, because I haven't seen that clip, but I'm curious, is that her, a moment of extreme presence, but she was kind of just not even thinking about her actions before that, and then it just all hits her at once. Is she thinking about the future? I'm curious, what exactly.
That was the thing with her. With her, it didn't hit her. That was the interesting thing. She just blocked off.
Yeah.
And I could see what she was doing is that I couldn't have done that. She didn't believe it in herself, and she was still intoxicated. So that's part of it too. And she was singing songs and talking about going to school and how she was going to go to Las Vegas and all of this kind of stuff. But you just saw what happened. She didn't identify herself as somebody that could possibly be responsible for something like that. So she could not accept responsibility. I don't know what ended up happening to her later on. But her video caused a lot of outrage in people. But I just saw the pieces of what had happened, the negligence, and you're in that condition and you think that's what other people do. I would never do something like that. I'm not a murderer.
Yeah. Just complete dissociation in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
seems to be what happened.
Yeah. Cops is, I mean, my girlfriend gives me a lot of shit for watching those types of clips because, she's like, you always watch Nature is Metal or cops clips of super violent things. And in a sick way, I like it, but I also think it makes me more aware that these type of things happen because I'm in a comfortable house in Plainview, New York. I am not really going out into crazy situations unless I choose to put myself there, whether it's hopefully never a drunk driving incident, but more the things that happen in nature where animals are just destroying each other on a daily basis, and you never really see that unless you're going out into it. I feel like those type of videos, while there's definitely a sick part of my brain that enjoys it, there's a part of me that is more aware that is a possibility. And I feel like when I have been in situations where those things could have happened, I'm less, I have less blind optimism, which may or may not have saved my life in certain situations because of seeing those things on YouTube where I'm like, no, I'm good. I just saw the end of this video 2 weeks ago. I don't want to be the next one.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a more philosophical approach, like it is for me. What is it that drives people into these conditions? That's always my question behind it. So I'm just curious about it. So I don't mind that I watch those things. And Nature is Metal too, though sometimes I can't handle what goes on there. But that's how do creatures live in the world? and what kind of horrors are some beings going to be subjected to in their life. It's part of life, right?
And because you see the videos of a deer that's just prancing around, and it seems like it doesn't have a care in the world, and then a lion comes out of nowhere and just completely bites its neck, just takes it out of existence in 5 seconds. But before that, the deer was just drinking water and looked as happy as can be. So I wonder, it would be interesting if we were able to ever get inside the mind of animals and feel how conscious or present they are. Like, is it truly just instinctual, or are they thinking, feeling? Is the deer going, oh, I'm drinking water, this is nice? Like, are they associating it with positive or negative things up until that moment where like a death trap comes along?
There's no doubt they're sentients, they just don't have cognitive abilities that we do. And we have been those animals, or will be in some life. Just consciousness manifesting in a particular body with particular abilities and the construct of a brain that cannot form concepts like we can, but they can still experience pleasure and pain. I mean, you can look at your cats and dogs or whatever. You can look at all kinds of monkeys and different, and see their emotions. Yeah. It's very easy to see them happy, depressed, or sad, but they don't, have a broad conceptual understanding of what's going on in the world. It's interesting because my brother just had a brain injury and an anoxic brain injury, so a lack of oxygen to the brain. And so his brain structure changed, and his consciousness is much more animal-like now. He's not as good at cognitive abilities or conceptual understandings. He can't form words, but you can see he still has his impulses and instincts towards pleasure and pain and laughter and human and emotions and all of those kinds of things. But the body that we're born into has abilities, certain abilities. The alien bodies, they have, for example, if you're to believe these UFO stories that are coming.
Yeah.
They have.
I was going to say, I've had a couple pilots on the podcast to talk about some UFO sightings. So I've gone deeper into the UFO game.
Yeah. Well, within a Buddhist cosmological, there's all kinds of beings, call them devas or angels or whatever in the universe. So it's not, and there's a variety of beings even. So within, tell the Tibetan monks or whatever about the aliens, and they're like, yeah, what? Yeah. Like, catch up with it. Of course there's beings but the interesting thing about the way they're being described is having these higher consciousness than we do. They have higher abilities than we do.
Yeah.
Which actually match the psychic powers in the ancient Buddhist texts too. Some of these abilities we can hone with a higher consciousness also. They're natural abilities. They just transcend the limited human structure. It's nice that we're not the best creatures in the world, isn't it? I mean, I would hate if humans were the highest.
Yeah, if we were the final form where,
wouldn't that be terrible? We're awful. We're awful to each other.
When you look at just like living in a perpetual state of war for centuries and nuclear weapons, there are a lot of awful things that humans seem to be capable of and end up achieving. But then also the thing that gives me optimism is that violence and poverty seem to be getting better over the long term. So while these incredibly toxic and dangerous things seem to be going on, we are, I don't know if we're going to evolve into humans 2.0 or what that would look like. Are we going to emerge with some sort of artificial intelligence? Is that going to play a part? I don't know if I want to be around for that if it does happen. Which way is it going to go? But it is, when you think about imagining, like if I was an alien and I was approaching Earth, and let's say I'd been to, 4 or 5 other planets along the way, and I'm just doing the backpacking, like I'm going universal backpacking. I'm literally just like going across galaxies, stopping and seeing how it is. And the other planets have been relatively peaceful compared to Earth. And then you go down to Earth, and it's like every country has nuclear weapons pointed at each other just perpetually, like just active nuclear weapons. There's genocide going on all, in multiple parts of the planet that's been going on for centuries. And yes, there are shining examples of humans doing good to each other on a daily basis, which is what I try to focus on. But if I was an alien being, you can't help but notice the violence when you're an outside observer, like coming into a planet that is, so worried about money and power and acquiring things, controlling people. I hope that we're going to eventually evolve into a higher form that is less materialistic and more worried about, like controlling emotions instead of controlling things.
Yeah. Well, that's if you're attached to this human form, but you might leave the human form and be in a different realm in your next body. So humans have their limited capacities, but they also have a great, great potential, like you're talking about. And I think it's great to focus on that potential, because then maybe we start to move towards it. But I also like to reflect on that there are beings that have just higher consciousness, where love and kindness and compassion and reason and respect and non-judgment are seen as a more natural way of living with beings, and that maybe there's higher consciousness beings that look at us like we look when we watch gorillas or something, or chimpanzees. Did you see that? There's a great Netflix documentary about the chimpanzee cultures.
I've heard about it. It's on my list for sure.
Yeah. So you'll see that they're not as evolved in the way they treat each other. There's a lot of fear and anger and hatred. I mean, there's some similarities there, but you can see. And so I like to imagine, at least, because I don't have any direct experience. I haven't talked to any aliens yet.
Yeah, we'll see.
Or angels. Yeah, we'll see. I'm open to it. But I like to imagine like a more evolved species. It doesn't have to be human.
Are you familiar? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I'm done.
I was going to ask, because I actually wrote this down to ask you about aliens and abduction. Are you familiar with the work of John Mack, who is a Harvard psychologist that interviewed people who experienced abductions?
Yeah, I was always less impressed by his work compared with other people. But I think there's something there. How do you feel about it? Are you impressed with some of the things?
I wasn't really thinking about it in terms of being impressed versus other people who have written about abductions, because I haven't read about it that much, to be honest. His was the first book that I had ever read about abduction experiences, and I had read stories here and there, but never had done a deep dive into someone's work. But I was one of the things that I noticed, and I thought about this when I was going through your page and looking at the things that you do with metta and loving kindness, and thinking about it in my own practice, is in many of the abduction accounts that John Mack reports in his book that's called Abduction, the people that he interviews and psychoanalyzes experience like a sense of calmness and peace when they're in the presence, when they're experiencing the other beings in front of them, whatever they are. They have an overwhelming sense in many cases of extreme peace, extreme presence, and not only just internally, but they feel that the beings are trying to communicate that peace and presence to them, almost like the aliens are doing a loving kindness meditation towards the abductees. Like it's almost like they're wishing them well, and they're actually like feeling that warm energy. And other people, it's not the case for everyone. Like there are people that report extremely traumatizing experiences, like being worked on and anal probes, like all these things, like it runs the gamut. And people are changed forever. So I don't want to paint a picture that like abductions are just like this peaceful, pleasant experience. But I was curious to what you thought in those cases where people are experiencing that sort of loving kindness energy or aura. What do you think that is? What are your thoughts on so many people reporting a similar thing when they're feeling that the experience is real? There's definitely real trauma there, as John Mack reports. Like he believes that the people believe what they're seeing, whatever it is. What do you think that does that mean anything, like a through line of calmness or peace to you? Is it like beings trying to communicate something to us? Is it more just like a projection of the people's minds that are experiencing something? What do you think that could be?
I don't know, and I'm open to all of those things, and anything that I say about it is purely speculative.
Yeah, of course. Me too. I just want to say that I was not there. I'm not a psychologist. Take everything with 1,000 grains of salt that I say.
Yes, me too. But what I do know is that to develop a higher level consciousness requires ethics to a degree. So I don't worry so much about it's not that beings with higher consciousness couldn't have greed, hatred, delusion, the destructive forces inside of them, but I think they have a greater degree of wisdom or learning, at least, and are more gentle creatures. And if they were not, they wouldn't be able to have the higher level consciousnesses. So same with what we're able to develop. There's a basis of sila that is required. Sila means ethical practices. That is required, that you are not committing harm, that you are respecting life, that you are not deceptive and lying. And that is required to be able to have higher conscious states of practice. And when I hear stories of, and this is speculative and it could just be mythological, even we could take it as mythological or as a reality, whatever people want to do. But when I hear about those, it's that they have a higher level of peace, clarity, wisdom, and insight, which makes them able to travel through the universe or move objects with their mind or whatever.
Yeah.
But you should look at the psychic powers. I mean, Deepa Ma was a modern teacher that was tested to develop them. But they're very similar, warping space and time and walking through walls, changing the elements and body doubling, all of that kind of stuff apparently is a human potential even, but it takes a great deal of both ethics for clarity. I mean, that's the important part of ethics in our meditation practice too. If we are antagonistic, causing problems, harming people in any way, that puts a ripple in our mind. You can't escape it. Everybody and anybody, you cannot escape that ripple. You cannot escape that nervous energy that you've just put there. And that will be like a screen that you've put over your mind's eye to be able to discern and see things clearly.
Yeah, Graham Hancock talks a lot about a lost civilization that may have been wiped out thousands of years ago that was capable of a much more direct relationship with matter than we have as human, like the human beings of 2023. And I'm not familiar with all of his work. I've heard him on a few podcasts, but he, like, in terms of the pyramids, there are a lot of things that are unexplained with the building of the pyramids and how a civilization back then would be able to move such huge and heavy blocks and carry them such long distances and do it with just human beings or simple ropes and pulleys, and being able to manipulate that sort of size of matter just doesn't add up completely. And I've heard Graham Hancock speculate on a like, was there a different segment of society of past humans that maybe their form of civilization, instead of trying to reach the ultimate form of materialism, was reaching the ultimate relationship with matter, and like building the relationship between attention and matter, and like how to direct your attention. And again, like it's all speculation until we find evidence of someone being able to do that, or actually being able to study that in some way. But I was reading about, and you mentioned the powers of the Buddha being able to walk through walls, being able to walk on water, or that was Jesus. But did the Buddha do that to?
Buddha also, that's one of the psychic powers. It's one of the cities. Yeah, changing the elements.
Like, was there like a civilization or a group of people that reached that level of enlightenment? And again, like pure speculation, but it is fun to think about, like to entertain the relationship. Like, is there a level of attention and matter that we just haven't even entertained yet because it seems silly, but maybe there is a deeper level?
Yeah, and he poses some great theories, and I saw the media trying to kind of smear him for it, but I think it's very rational, the things that he's discussing, and obviously, like you said, speculating on, but also there's this kind of evidence that needs an answer. And what I enjoy about it is the humility that it brings, that we are not the be-all, end-all. And I feel like people are so much more, as, Christianity has kind of decreased in our society, and I think that people can hold to Christian values in a way that is helpful and uplifting, and maybe more loosely interpretive of the Bible stories or whatever. And Jesus was great. I love Jesus, but
yeah.
But because it's not the overarching belief systems anymore, I mean, it really just is not. It doesn't have. Then we are now open to different tellings of the universe and our place in it, which is, to me, really exciting. The construct of what we've believed to be true, maybe not, and that's a kind of awakening that's wonderfully happening.
Yeah,
right
exploring
now.
The unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I have,
and then allowing, because what did we do before when people would come forward with these amazing things that happen, and we'd push them away, or we wouldn't believe them, or we, and often in there are cases where people are fabricating those stories or whatever.
Yeah. I just have to run to the bathroom real quick. I'm just going to take a small break, and then I'll be right back.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned AI before, and I was digging around on Reddit news, certain circulars on Reddit that have to do with meditation, just because I was curious on what would come up. And I actually found a story on robot guided meditation that I wanted to get your thoughts on. So this is a study from the Journal of Human Computer Studies. And it says researchers at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University and Hong Kong Science Park recently explored the potential value of robots as guides for two different types of meditation practices: loving kindness and walking meditations. Their findings, published in the International Journal of Human Computer Studies, suggest that the unique characteristics of social robots can impact their effectiveness as assistants during meditation. Quote, our recent paper explores the potential use of social robots to maintain or enhance young adults' mental well-being, especially following the stress and isolation from the COVID-19 pandemic. We aim to address mental health care avoidance by proposing robot-guided interventions, specifically loving kindness and walking meditations that can be conveniently practiced at home. So I wanted to ask you, is robot guided meditations something that you see as positive? Does that strike you as scary? Is this just AI's way of sneaking into the mind of human beings through faux mindfulness training, like trying to infiltrate through the powers of meditation? Like, do you think this could be a thing that actually benefits humanity?
Well, I don't know why a person would seek a robot rather than a real teacher. But giving basic meditation instructions, you do say the same things over and over again. There is a technique. Anybody can do that part of it for sure. I don't know if AI would be able to adjust to the appropriate responses to a student's questions about meditation. They probably could, because a lot of it is the same. You know, if you're having certain kinds of problems in your meditation practice, there's certain therapeutics that help, adjustments, skill. I don't know why a human would, but it's not a bad thing to get meditation. If they're the right instructions, then that's a good use of AI,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, they had pictures in the study, and it looked like a robot is literally on the path. I assume saying things to you, or mantras or reminders, and it struck me as very creepy. But maybe that's also just me judging it, because that, we're not at the point where robots with human features, like we have, artificial intelligence in our phone. We are constantly interacting with algorithms, but to have a sort of assistant in the form of a robot is not common culture yet. So maybe it's just me judging it because of that. But yeah, I don't know why.
There's no sentience to it, though. There's no sentience to a robot. They're not a being. They are information. So I don't know. For me, it's just like, it's like anything. I like the real thing. I like organic materials. I like real. I like the smell. Do I want fake plants in my house, or I want real plants in my house? I want, pornography, or would I rather have a lover? I would rather have a lover. The real thing to me is always better. And the depth of connection that I've had with teachers, that if it moved and inspired me, I would much rather have that. The relationship that forms out of that, the heart connection, you can't have that with a artificial intelligence. But for good beginner instructions, that's a fine use for AI.
At least for now, it's not sentient, but who knows if we set things down the path.
Can't ever be sentient.
You don't think so?
It can't ever be sentient. No, it can't have a consciousness. It's not possible. Consciousness, it cannot come from not having a consciousness. It's neither created or destroyed. You cannot create it from I know they try to think of what consciousness, but when you really study, there's mind and there's the knowing mind. It can be a knowing, and it can even have impulses or whatever. That does not mean it has consciousness. It cannot have consciousness.
So consciousness, you're saying it could have a knowing mind, or it can have the knowing mind?
Well, it's having the conceptual mind. It's having the conceptual impulse mind, even if it leads one thing to another. But it cannot have consciousness. Consciousness cannot be created in that way, not by humans. No. I'm sure because of that, it can't. It's why it's dangerous, because without a consciousness, it can't. It can lead to destruction. It would have no wisdom to be able to, without that being imprinted upon it. But no, it cannot have consciousness.
let's say if we had a level of AI that was being incorporated on a personal level. And I don't know if you see the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix. So
Mhm.
yeah, like something like that where it would almost be like some sort of Apple style iHome AI where it's constantly interacting with you, constantly learning about it. You can form relationships with it. You can feel love and jealousy and hatred and all those things. Would there be a level of interaction or an experience that you had with an AI being that could convince you that it had some form of consciousness or a level of consciousness? Like if you, I don't know exactly what that would be. You know, if you cried when it got destroyed or something, like you felt grief over the passing of an AI, or you formed a relationship with it. It became a friend of some sort. Would that qualify as being conscious?
Their consciousness, because I was attached to it.
Yeah, I guess there would be an attachment for in a friendship, or uh, in her, it's a legitimate lover. It's a romantic relationship with Scarlett Johansson's voice. She plays the AI in the movie. Would
Yeah.
and there was definitely attachment there. But what if you formed a healthy, loving relationship with a being that happened to be AI, or maybe you didn't know it was AI, but it was revealed 10 years down the line that he or she was actually created by humans? Would that be something that could convince you, or you just don't think that AI could ever spawn a version of consciousness that could be close to human?
Yeah, no, they can't. They just simply can't. They can they can only be programmed and maybe continue on with the programming, or maybe the programming takes on a mind of its own. But that's not
Mm.
consciousness. That isn't. So it's not sentience at all. It's not possible. We can't create that. We do not have that power. But we can create, computers and robots and all of those kinds of things. So no, I'm not. I'm not. And anyways, I wouldn't get attached to a robot. I'm not even getting attached to people. So
Yeah. I could definitely see myself becoming attached to a robot.
really,
I
come
do.
on.
Some of these videos that I see online of a and granted they don't look human like, and that's definitely a big part of the attachment, is that we see ourselves and other people. We like I'm not going to fall in love with a rock that's speaking to me, but I could fall in love with a robot that looked like a version of a human being. I do think, even if the AI being was not conscious, I do think that if enough things were there that registered to me as human, that I could form a relationship with that being.
Mm,
I don't know exactly how
mm,
it would feel because um, I've never been in that situation. Like, maybe it would turn out like
yeah.
Ex Machina. Maybe I would just be manipulated by it, by her, until because she was looking for a way out, and created she was just giving off the human calculated signals of falling in love in order to get me to act in a certain way and form an unhealthy attachment to her. And then as soon as I, am in a vulnerable position, she just slices me through the stomach and runs out of the compound. Like that's, could definitely end up.
Do you think that it ever could, on even a material level, that they ever could simulate, like skin and blood and a heartbeat, and in a way that is even believable? I don't know. Like I said, I've always moved more towards organic substances.
I think that if we are to form relationships with AI, that there needs to be something physical. It can't just be a voice or I guess you could, like, if someone was texting you, like there are long distance relationships where stories of people falling in love without having ever touched the other person. So if you were just listening to someone's voice or reading their text, I guess that is possible. But I yeah, I don't know what the boundaries of, like, how far could I go in terms of the emotional and the physical before my brain kicks in and goes, this is not a real thing. This is not a real person. Like, do I need the physical? Is the emotional and verbal communication enough? It's interesting to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. It is interesting to think about, and it's interesting the way that our mind can build constructs a reality to the degree that we are living this, what we're projecting onto another person. Of course, we do that with organic, sentient people also. But I don't see myself as succumbing to something like that. But I don't know. People are talking about AI, and I don't worry about it. But I think it's because I'm ignorant about it.
You make. It got cut off a little bit. What did you say? You make what about it?
I don't worry about it, but I think it's because I'm ignorant about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% no expert on it either. I like listening to people much smarter than me talk about it.
Yeah, me too.
And
yeah, me too. But then I start going, do I want to have another thing to worry about? And I just turn it off. And I just go, no, that won't be a problem.
So what if there was a being, let's say 20 years from now, that spoke like a human, felt like a human, in all intensive purposes, it was indistinguishable from a human being, and you were called in as a meditation teacher to essentially act as training this being to become more mindful and to see if AI could become more self-aware and actually recognize that it was having a thought or playing around with its own identity beyond just spitting out algorithmic learning processes. And would you be interested in something like that? Because I imagine that we're gonna want, if we do have AI, it would be better that we had a mindful AI than an AI that was not, basically identifying with every single thing that popped into its, quote unquote head to the level that it's able to identify with it.
So, but you couldn't give them mindfulness because they don't have consciousness, so they can't be aware. They can only be programmed. But you could change the programming to value protecting life, to value love and kindness. You could program an artificial intelligence to care about, but it's not a care, but it's their programming to. It's just information that you're giving them, but they couldn't be mindful. They could only say they are being mindful, but they couldn't actually be mindful because they don't have a consciousness. But you can program them, like have an AI that is put in the ethics, put in the factors of enlightenment as values or whatever. And kindness and loving kindness and generosity and helpfulness and wanting others to do well. That would be a good way to program AI.
Yeah, I'll leave it to the engineers for sure. I mean, even saying that is scary because our entire world is affected. There are billions of people that are affected by algorithms that are created by 30 people in a room in Silicon Valley. So it's like, yeah, leave it to the engineers, but also are the thoughts and desires of the billions of people that are being affected by it being represented in those little tiny rooms that are just tinkering with the future of artificial intelligence. So well, this
is why we have to, as individuals, develop mindfulness, because that helps us to see through any kind of conditioning, any kind of manipulation. And actually, if you want to go off on another deep end
100%.
tangent, I was reading a book.
That's what podcasts are. What are podcasts for if not to explore unintentional tangents?
I was reading a book that is said to be with very little evidence. Very, I'll just a caveat to what I'm saying here. Very, very, very little evidence. But a nurse that collected, or that was brought into the Roswell crash, where an alien being was taken and interviewed. And she would communicate with an alien being because that alien being would only speak to her telepathically. And so she was kept around by the people, whatever. This is the story. This woman lived out her days in Ireland and then mailed this transcript to some modern author, and he recently released it. Like I said, there's no evidence. He claims that he destroyed these original documents, but there's very, very little evidence. Nevertheless, it was a really interesting story in which this alien said things that really matched a lot of what the Buddha says, which is that our realm is under the control of this being Mara, which means that Mara is trying to manipulate our thoughts all the time. And this is what this alien being said, is that we are trapped on this earth realm as slaves to this being that manipulates us through our thinking. And I love that. But, and I showed a friend and they're like, that is depressing. That is totally, but I have already accepted that the human, through my practice, that we are not our thoughts, and that we have a negativity bias. And what is that? Because if you and I could choose it right now, we'd say, yeah, let me get rid of loneliness and depression and jealousy. I don't want any of those feelings. And yet they are regular visitors for all of us. So obviously there is something that is controlling us, and that can be metaphorical for you, or you can think of it as an actual creature. But what I know to be true is that mindfulness is the power.
Yeah.
And that's pure awareness. Once you have that awareness, you cannot be manipulated, not culturally, not by religious zealots, not by AI, not by anything. If you strengthen your mind with mindfulness, then you can't be manipulated. So that's the good news.
Yeah, you mentioned the people being influenced culturally, and I've noticed that a lot of the intrusive thoughts that I have, whether they pop up during meditation or throughout the day, they're very puritanical in nature. And I grew up in the West. I'm from New York. I grew up Catholic. A lot of times these thoughts are, you're eating too much, you're not working out enough, Catholic guilt. And I'm no longer a practicing member of Catholicism, but I still have these puritanical background sentiments running in my mind. And I've started to notice that the more I meditate. So I was curious if you've noticed a difference in the thoughts that your students report depending on areas of the world that they're from. Like, do people from the West tend to be more puritanical? People from the East have different thoughts. Like, have you noticed a difference in those areas?
Yeah, there are definitely differences, but they all come from, we all have the same sort of basic ingredients, like I said before, neurosis is in different kinds of ways. Puritanical, people from the East have their own version of that. It looks different than us, but they definitely have their own version of that. But that is one of the things that we get liberated from. That, and it's not just us Catholics. I was raised Catholic too. It's it's a lot of people that are conditioned in that way, and it can be an informer within our meditation practice. And it's good to, in the very beginning, nip that in the bud and say that is not what's going to drive should or have to, or because an authority told me to, or any of that. It's a very neurotic kind of energy that can really obstruct our meditation practice, but rather setting an intention to, this benefits me, that's why I'm doing it. Then we're doing it from faith, trust, confidence, and or love. And those are better motivators for our practice. And in all ways, I mean, it's really hard to talk about ethics, which is really such, and values. It's such an important part of the practice, and yet it's hard to teach in the West because of the puritanical way of thinking. It comes so heavy-handedly, you know. And yet without it, we need the values of not killing, of not stealing, of not being harmful with our sexual energy, and of being mindful of the kind of speech we're engaging in, gossip and lies and malicious speech, so that we recognize it on an external level, or that when a government begins to send weapons, for example, we know there's a value here we have of keeping peace, of protecting life, and we don't change that because we're the people on our team or whatever are now the ones that are doing those kinds of things. Or, for example, what goes on in the mainstream media is so much kind of malicious, dark, cruel at times speech, like speech that is reprehensible in all kinds of ways. When we start to practice that for ourselves, we keep ourselves protected from being influenced by that, and letting that affect our minds and go down there. This didn't used to be a thing. It's a very new thing. So we have to be so mindful when we're going to watch any kind of media, because they're now out there just to press a viewpoint. And when you are just not asking for truth, they're not looking for the truth. They're looking for viewpoints. And when you're pressing a viewpoint, you're going to have an enemy. When you have enemy, you're going to promote division. And so that's what's been happening. Everybody knows now culturally we're getting more divided, and that's precisely the cause of it. It's the people thinking that it is of them, their job, not to tell the truth, not to plainly state the facts, but to give opinions about the truth, to call names, to whatever, to Fox wants the who, and CNN, MSB, they want the other people. And they're all doing the same thing. Yeah. There's no good guys. There's no good guys.
Yeah, there's a joke. I forget what comedian told it, but I might have been Bill Hicks. But the premise of it is that no matter what corporation it is, that Fox, CNN, Lockheed Martin, Whole Foods, like whatever side of the political aisle you're on, they're all being pulled by this puppet master of corporations, corporate greed, the politics that are infiltrating people's brains. All, I guess, like if there is a through line to or a silver lining to the political divide, it's that there is a singular source of corporate greed that is influencing the political divide, and like kind of both sides are sucking off the same teat in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's getting so painful that maybe it'll start waking us up. And that seems to be the case, but it isn't always it's just amazing how much repetition, how susceptible human consciousness really is. You know, you look at a Hitler and what he was able to do with the manipulation of millions of people, and or a Jim Jones, through our consciousness. Things do begin to seep into our consciousness when our medias, even though nobody trusts them anymore, they still have the power of seeping, because they tell a story, they tell a narrative again and again, and tell a lie a bunch of times. Somebody smart, and it will be accepted as truth. That's what's the interesting thing about our consciousness. So, but mindfulness helps us. I mean, that's the thing, is what you're doing when you're practicing mindfulness. You're bringing your attention to reality in an unbiased way. What is the actual experience I'm having right now? Sensory experience, emotions, thoughts. And then we see the formation of a thought, story, and the way we project that onto reality. And while we are watching that process in ourselves, it is not possible anymore for somebody else's projected thought to infiltrate our minds, because we see it for what it is. It's just this isn't a reality. And we see truth for what it is. And we get very, very, very honest.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think it's never been a better time to be mindful and become mindful, because of how invested these companies are in mass marketing and manipulation tactics, and just getting into the psyche of people's desires and making them make choices and kind of planting the seeds of desire without the people actually realizing it. And I just read an article about there are corporations that are right now investigating and investing in ways to market to people in their dreams, which sounds insane, but there are people out there that are dedicating time, energy, and money to being able to not only infiltrate our conscious mind, but our, unconscious asleep mind. And if I think I don't know what meditation will look like in terms of a global practice in the next 5 to 10 years or so, but I could see people starting to wake up to it and having meditation be as common as working out and going to the gym. It's just something that you need to do to be a functioning member of society and to have autonomy in your choices, because of these corporations armed with billions of dollars and all these resources that you don't even have a shot if you aren't practicing some sort of mindfulness. And it's like, okay, I went to the gym for an hour today, and then I went to my meditation gym for an hour today. I do have some friends that meditate, but it's in nowhere near the same mainstream level as physical exercise is seen as a benefit. So I could see people starting to wake up to it and almost like using mindfulness to arm themselves against this mass manipulation and mass marketing, and starting to wake up to it.
Yeah, and I think the first thing is to know that we are susceptible. And that took me a long time to admit to myself. So I know that is not an easy thing for people to admit. They think their thoughts and views and opinions are just reality. And mindfulness deconstructs all of that and helps us to see the projected reality of the mind, our personal viewpoints, from reality itself. And then all reality becomes, everybody's right from their own point of view, said a great female sage, and I can't remember her name. But everybody is right from their own point of view. Everybody is right and nobody is right, right? Personal points of view are just one thing. But to have the humility that we have that susceptibility, but we also have absolutely the power. And that's what mindfulness is. Did you ever see WALL-E?
I have seen clips of it. I have not seen the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's WALL-E, where there's these sort of chunky people with their screens in front of their faces, and they're just cruising around on this ship. And then they're living this life, and then one of them gets knocked off of that reality, and they're like, whoa. Well, that's very much like what we're doing all the time whenever we're living in the program of our minds. I mean, we're all just living out a program in our minds, and mindfulness helps us to break the program and to see which part. And we're programmed in good ways, right? We got out of bed this morning, good for us. Took a shower, right? Maybe we even exercised. Maybe we ate some healthy food. We're taking care, hugged our partners or whatever, and took care of our children and our families or whatever. So we have our good programming. We have good programming. But we also all have destructive programming. And the feedback loop for that is that we feel stress.
Yeah.
When we're in the when we are in the negative programming, stress is what we will feel from it.
Yeah.
So that awareness, what awareness does is, as a byproduct, grow all that good stuff that we're programmed to do. More, makes it more, more. And weakens all of the negative. And but what are we talking about is greed gone wild, right? Greed out of control. And corporations and the people in charge, and then they can manipulate us, but we as individuals can stop the greed ourselves.
Yeah.
We have that power.
Speaking of stopping the greed, and in line with arming yourself with mindfulness, one of my goals of 2024 is to do at least a silent 3-day meditation. I've never done anything beyond a couple hours. So I want to do a multiple day silent retreat in 2024. And I know you've had, uncountable hours in intense retreat style settings and trainings. So like what should I expect going into a retreat that maybe you'd wish you had known before the first time you did it, in terms of the positives, the dark sides? What should I know going into the abyss?
Well, I wouldn't set myself up with any kind of knowing before I went into my very first retreat. Other than that, and I knew this, it will be uncomfortable.
For sure.
Sometimes it will be comfortable. And you're living that in a reality in your life all the time anyways. But when we go on those intensive retreats, we sit with the mind, and it's like a pressure cooker. It makes everything that is negative or reactionary come right to the surface. And we want that to happen because those are the motivating factors inside of us that are limiting us in our lives. And when the only way out is through. The only way out of them is to face them squarely and see the phantoms that they are. The only power that any kind of internal motivation has over us, negative feeling, depressive thoughts, anxious thoughts, angry thoughts, self-doubt thoughts, the only power those have. What are thoughts? Thoughts are words in our head, and then with corresponding feelings in our body when they turn into emotions. They're nothing. They are nothing, nothing, nothing. And yet they have the potential, when unseen, to form a beautiful universe or to form a living hell. So when we put ourselves into those conditions, then all of it will come to the surface. All of the army of Mara will come out trying to get you and disrupt you, and it will be uncomfortable. But that's okay. That's okay. Just like training the body.
Yeah.
When we train the mind, when you're training your body to do anything, there's a painful edge, right? And we don't stop because it's uncomfortable, or that's actually a sign that something is happening. You have resistance, your muscles are working more, and it's painful, right? Or if you're trying to learn a new skill, play an instrument or a new language, there's pain involved with that because there's a reorientation and a readjustment. And so pain in our meditation practice is not a sign that we're not doing well in our practice. And so we stop measuring a successful meditation or not by how much pleasure or pain we had. It's irrelevant how much pleasure or pain. Pain can be a real sign, not always, but it can be, that we're on the brink of something, of a big shift or change in consciousness.
Yeah.
So that would be a thing. It's going to be painful, and you can handle it.
Yeah, I guess the pain is something that exactly I'm going to experience pain. I'm going to experience uncomfortability. But my number one fear is I've had brief moments of, I don't even know what to call it, almost a hyper awareness during some of my longer meditations where it's not a panic attack, but it just feels like I'm almost too aware in a way, and it freaks me out, like in terms of what's going on in my body, whether it's my breath or my heartbeat. Uh, Almost like being too high on weed, but not nearly that level of panic. Like I didn't call 911 while I was meditating. But I guess my fear would be getting trapped in one of those cycles without any sort of distraction, or setting myself up for 3 days of experiencing the dark side of being too like a hyper awareness. I don't even know if that's the right word, but I don't know. Does that resonate with you at all?
We can explore the mind is exactly as it is now. Why do we imagine that this is going to be our experience? Why do we do that? It's a funny thing that the mind does. You're imagining that you're going to enter a place of fear from being too aware.
Yeah.
It's just a creation in your mind. You're creating that right now. Why even think about it? We don't need to, but to address that story, if it does happen for you, then just that's the experience of fear. Here it is, fear. You would drop whatever present object was there, and the most apparent object would then be fear. And so fear of awareness, here it is. Look at what does the mind say? What is the story? Look at that fabrication. It's another fabrication. The mind just creating a problem.
Yeah. It's kind of like the
You're too aware. It's just a thought. That's all the mind is saying. And it creates, yes, that means something terrible is going to happen with this awareness. And that's what the mind can do. I mean, it's wonderful to talk about out loud because it's hilarious. It's hilarious that that's what our mind will do, and that it can possess us completely, and it has.
Yeah, it goes back to the sports thing. If I'm imagining that I'm gonna go through a 2-hour shit show on the mound, and it's gonna be, a very dark, anxiety-provoking experience, that is just a thought. I don't have to identify with that thought, or it doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen. So similar thing with going into my first meditation. I'm just creating an expectation for myself that is, like you said, just purely a creation of my own mind. I'm just making things more stressful than they have to be.
And there's a root of it, and it's good to name the roots at the emotional level, get away from the thought and the story, and go, what is this emotion? And it's usually worry. Worry, it will have us try to imagine everything possibly bad that could happen and to keep us safe from it, but it doesn't. It's not very effective at keeping us safe. So, but learning to recognize that emotion and naming it at an emotional level in terms of our mindfulness practice is the technique to use. This is just.
Have you ever experimented with psychedelics?
Yeah, I think it was my gateway into meditation practice when I was. I haven't done it recently, or at all since I started practicing meditation, which is when I was 23 years old. But from 17 to like 21-ish, then I had no other influences that would make me interested in meditation, and this is before it was popular. So I feel like it helped me to be curious about consciousness in some subconscious kinds of ways. But mushrooms and LSD, I experimented with those.
What were those first few times like? Because I've never taken what people would call a heroic dose of something. I've taken various levels of microdoses to medium-sized doses. And I guess part of the reason why I haven't done a full dose is because of some of my previous experiences with other drugs like weed, where I've gotten way too high and it just turned into a 6-hour panic attack. So that's also, it's also in the back of my mind, like go like basically like going to a hospital and having a doctor take my pulse and be like, "You're fine, get the fuck out of here." Like, what do you? We have a gunshot wound patient sitting right next to you. Can you please stop taking up space in my hospital? But yeah,
I feel for that. I nearly did that. I took a 5 milligram gummy and nearly called an ambulance because I thought I was dying. I can't believe that I went down that thread of thought and then didn't see it. I can't believe that I did. But I'm like, okay, maybe I don't need any of that stuff. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I know it helps. I think meditation brings us to these heightened states of consciousness, and they don't have the consequences that psychedelics do. It's interesting, the studies that are happening about depression and psilocybin and all of that kind of stuff. I find it as a therapy technique very, very interesting. I have also found that hearing stories of people who've done ayahuasca to be really fascinating, more so even than psilocybin and LSD. The things that they were able to get a glimpse of, to me, is very interesting. But you can only get glimpses from those experiences. Everything else has to come from conditioning the mind.
What was that?
And that.
Oh, sorry. I was going to ask you, what did that glimpse feel like when you were taking mushrooms and LSD those first couple times? That thing that drew you towards a path of meditation. When you were in that moment, what were you seeing, feeling, experiencing that felt like a glimpse into something you now know as mindfulness?
It was that wasn't conscious. Like, it was all subconscious. I don't know. I just wonder if that's the reason why I started to ask the bigger questions, is because I had those psychedelic experiences. None of them, my meditation experiences were way more deep, way more profound than anything that I had. But I just wonder if it expanded my questioning abilities or made me see outside of the conditioned mind for a moment enough that I wanted to meditate really, really badly. And there's nobody around me. And I just had a strong drive to do so. So I wonder if it had helped. But other people, I had a friend that said that when he took ayahuasca, that the feeling of, his name was Jonathan, the feeling of Jonathan had disappeared. And there was so much bliss. And I was like, wow, that's like I never had that from taking mushrooms or LSD. And that is a very deep understanding, but it didn't stay with him. And the deep wisdom didn't stay. I mean, the path, it doesn't, this is like a get rich quick scheme. Get enlightened quick. You can't. It's a gradual thing. There are people that have these experiences, like a Byron Katie. She had a very interesting, the way she describes her consciousness from one day to a next. This is very unusual, though. And I attribute it to her. She must have done practice in a past life and just had one final nudge. She just needed a last nudge. But most of us need to put in the condition.
Yeah.
Do the work of practice to really and truly free the mind. Put in the cost.
I've read the articles on the get rich quick side of psychedelic experimentation, and the bro science behind it is that a dose of mushrooms is equivalent to 1,000 hours of meditation or whatever. It's just like insert X sessions of meditation for this dose, and people talk about it as a way to sort of supercharge your way into enlightenment. So I was just curious if you had ever experienced anything like that. But now, having done meditation, I would just be curious to see how I'd be able to use some of the skills that I've acquired to navigate the trip. And I definitely think it's better that I do have some experience with it now, and having not taken a full dose, that when I do take it in the future, hopefully that will translate a little bit to, observe what's going on in my mind and not necessarily identify with the dark side or the light side, whatever, that I can kind of like stay a little bit balanced on that Tony Hawk as I'm grinding the rail of my psychedelic trip.
Well, and it's true that it can bring sensory experience in a way that it does take meditation a long time to concentrate and focus the mind. But we're taught those are temporary experiences that come and go. And those are not the point of Buddhist practice or mindfulness practice. Mindfulness is for understanding the laws of the universe and understanding the mind, understanding what is helpful, wholesome, uplifting, onward leading, and what is not. There's an ethical component to it that people who stay in psychedelics, I have friends that went really deep down ayahuasca paths and, they came to an end, and that end wasn't permanent transformation. It wasn't enlightenment. But it was, there were heart-opening experiences, beautiful heart-opening that helped their spiritual practice, but then they turned to meditation because that's where the consistent and real work was coming. So.
Yeah. So to end off, I wanted to ask you about comedy because I discovered your work on Duncan Trussell's podcast, which is a wonderful podcast, and I'm also a huge fan of stand-up comedy. And I wanted to ask you, what is it about comedy that drew you to, like, what drew you to comedy and your love of comedy? Because it's such a vast world. There's so many options, different tastes, different styles. And you mentioned that you've been a big fan of comedy since you were a kid. So I was curious how you got drawn to that world.
Yeah, well, I was a kid in the 80s, so before you were born. And
not much. I was 93.
Okay. No, yes. Okay. So in the 80s, Bill Cosby had like an HBO comedy special, Cosby himself it was called. And then Eddie Murphy had Raw.
The red leather pants.
Delirious. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so, we had an old cassette of Eddie Murphy even before Raw or Delirious were out, like early. He's like late teens, maybe 20, 21. Great comedy set. And then Richard Pryor. And these are just the comedians we would watch stand up when I was a kid. And I loved it. And I've continued. I don't go to a lot of live comedy shows, though I might incorporate that as part of my social life again. But I particularly love a smart comic that can point out the absurdity of life, because I think that helps you to get out of the conditioned mind and see things as funny, and also in a light way, where there's not a heavy moral, puritanical view, but an absurd, it just helps. It's a deconstructing kind of practice, and I love it. I feel like it's almost related to spiritual. It's one of the things. Louis C.K. is my absolute favorite comic ever. And if I were to measure by somebody that can make me like gut laugh, it's Louis, with consistency. There's comics that you enjoy, they don't make you laugh necessarily, but you can really enjoy them. And I would put like a Robin Williams in that. He's just like this crazy character, and so he's fun to watch or whatever. But Louis C.K. And then sometimes Louis C.K. goes way too far for me.
I love it.
I know. I think boys are always they're easier. I'm just like, okay, come on, not leave that part of it out. But yeah, that's for me. What about you?
So there are two things that I would sneak watch when I was a kid, and one is porn, and then the other one was HBO late night comedy specials. And my parents probably thought I was just always watching porn because they would catch me watching HBO, but it would be like, it wouldn't be the softcore porn a lot of the times. It would be like Chris Rock's Bigger and Blacker, or Dave Chappelle Killing It Softly, Patrice O'Neal, like it felt like I was watching porn because I was like, I'm not supposed to be hearing this at 11 years old, but I loved it, and
Oh yeah.
it was amazing. So that was my first introduction was in those years around 11 to 13, sneaking on to the HBO late night channels that my parents ordered but hadn't yet figured out the parental guidance controls of DirecTV. So I was benefiting from that. And then I took a bit of a break in high school, and then I really got back into stand up at the end of college when I started listening to podcasts. I my entry into podcasting was listening to stand-up comedians like Joe Rogan, like Duncan Trussell, like every Mark Norman, like everyone has a podcast now that's a stand-up, and I was drawn to, and I wasn't conscious of it back then, but now I realize how much of a dichotomy that stand-up comedy is when you put it against the pale of all the serious political podcasts or technology, whatever it is. Like everything has such a serious, overarching, like moral tone a lot of times, and then stand-up is just like, when you're talking about artificial intelligence, it's what you said. It's like the absurdity of it, or if it's politics, or if it's sex, and that sort of trained me to start seeing the absurdity in everyday life when I'm listening to hours of stand-up comedy every single day. I'm working out, listening to comedy podcasts, and almost dropping weights on myself because I'm laughing, and that's really how I grew to love stand-up comedy. I sort of rediscovered it through podcasting, and now I go to more live shows, being around New York City, because I don't know how long I'm going to be in New York, and I'm trying to take advantage of being in one of the comedy capitals of the world. It's like New York, LA, Austin. While there are all these shows, Vegas, yes. Have I been? I don't think I've been to a show in Vegas. I need to go to a comedy show in Vegas next time I'm there. I'm always just losing money. If I'm gonna lose money, I might as well laugh next time.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot here.
Yeah,
there's a lot. Yeah, and I think that lightening up is always good for our spiritual practice too. A heaviness doesn't help us. I say that the balancing factors that are really important are discipline for sure, that willingness to put in effort and energy, but balanced with humor. Those two things together are big supports for spiritual practice.
Well, thank you, Melissa, for coming on the show. I've taken up way too much of your time, and it flew by, which is always a good sign. I'm looking at my timer, and I looked.
Well, we covered.
Yeah, we did. I looked at it at like 45 minutes, and then looked back at an hour 57. I was like, "Holy shit!" That felt like an hour. Which is good. So, where can people follow you on social media? I know you have a YouTube page as well, and it mentioned on your website that you have a book coming out in the future. So, where can people keep posted on those things?
MelissaMcKay.net is the website, which leads you to Instagram. I have that, and then a YouTube page. Those are all listed on there, and then whatever future events that I have are also on there. We have a regular Sunday class. It's drop-in and on donation. People can always join for that Zoom meditation.
Okay, awesome.
All of it is.
Thank you again so much for your time. This has been.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation a lot.
Yes, I enjoyed the planned parts and the tangents. Everything. It was a wonderful conversational trip. So thank you so much.
Good. All right. Talk to
Bye,
you soon.
Melissa.